Ferguson, Missouri elected its first black mayor last night, nearly 6 years after a white police officer shot and killed 18-year-old Michael Brown in that city. A grand jury chose not to indict the officer in that case, sparking widespread protests back in 2014. City Councilwoman Ella Jones will now become the city's first black and first female mayor. She succeeds James Knowles, who was the mayor when Brown was killed. NBC News correspondent Steve Patterson shows us how Ferguson and its new leadership are reacting to the death of George Floyd.
All said and done, it was a mostly peaceful night in the streets of Ferguson, Missouri, even late at night as the protests raged well beyond curfew. We saw some marching in the streets. Obviously, some of the protesters were trying to shut some of the intersections down. But by and large, it was just people wanting to get their word out, wanting to get the message out. Not any of the widespread destruction that we had seen in days previous. Specifically, watching the protests and being with them that night, the police were almost embedded with them. They followed them along. Speaking to some of the protesters, it was almost, you get a sense that, why are they following us? Why are the police here? What do they want to do? It got tense at one moment with a group of protesters around 11:30 as they were blocking traffic. But then the protesters sort of found out by the police that the police were just kind of ushering them along, keeping them safe from traffic. So we saw kind of this incredible moment of community policing where the protesters, once they realized what the police were doing, actually chanted and cheered for the protesters. One of the most heartening things I think I've seen covering this story on the ground so far. Some businesses were hit. Obviously, you can see the one behind me. This is not from last night. Nights previous, though, have been the source of some damage and devastation. Widespread fires, widespread looting. We have seen officers that were shot. 4 were shot the night previous. All of them expected to recover, but there was a retired police captain, David Dorn. He was shot and killed defending a pawn shop. He was doing security then and was unfortunately just got caught in between one of the looters there. There is a $10,000 reward for any information that leads to the capture of the person that did that. But again, looking at the protests from last night, seeing the progression both here and in downtown St. Louis, it seems like things are a whole lot more peaceful. There are more planned protests as the weeks go on. But again, the planned protests, specifically here in St. Louis and the adjoining areas, are the ones that are peaceful. So a lot of city leaders we spoke to, city police, as well as the mayor here, hope that this kind of wave of peace continues. Speaking of the mayor, I meant to say mayor-elect. There is a new sheriff in town, and her name is Ella Jones. She's the mayor-elect here in Ferguson, first black mayor of the city, first female mayor of the city. Both of those things she's doing all in one. She's already been the first black female city councilman, so she's used to blazing trails. I asked her what her kind of message is and what she represents to the people of Ferguson and to the people outside this community, and she said one word. She said inclusion. She hopes that she can provide a symbol of hope, but also continue some of the reforms that we've seen with the police department, with the criminal justice system here, that may have led to that moment last night. We'll send it back to you.
Massive crowds gathered in London's Hyde Park today, standing in solidarity with protesters in the U.S. NBC News foreign correspondent Molly Hunter spoke with demonstrators about why this movement went global.
Hey, Allison, so we're in Hyde Park, central London, and the crowds are big. Take a look. Thousands of people have gathered out here. Open field, tons of signs, lots of cheering. Listen to those chants. Those are familiar chants. Black Lives Matter right now. They've been saying George Floyd. They've been saying don't shoot. A lot of the chants that we've also been hearing in the States. Now, we spoke with some of the protesters out here about why they're out here. Take a listen. What was it like watching the protests, watching what's happening in the U.S. from over here? What does that feel like?
It feels empowering to show that how strong our media has become today. From that one video, it sparked all of this, which is, I believe, the right action for us to do. We want people to know that we saw the video and that we care and we want to change.
It's so
upsetting to watch the protests in the US because you guys are being censored. That is what's happening to you. And it's so upsetting. You guys are fighting as hard as you can, and we hear you. That's why we're out here today. We are fighting for you guys.
What do you want her to take out of today? What do you want her to see?
I want her to see that everyone stands together, that racism is nothing to be stood for. There is a lot of white people here too. There's a lot of different coloured people here that stand with us, and it's not okay. So I want her to know that we are strong if we stand together, and, you know, just want justice.
And Allison, what I thought was interesting, a lot of the people said that looking around, the crowd is really diverse. It's not just a lot of black Brits out here. There are a lot of white people, a lot of people of all different ethnicities, nationalities out here in solidarity to support. Now, a lot of the chants, as you hear, what are they saying? George Floyd right now. We're hearing the same chants over and over again. Now, the protest we covered on Sunday started in Trafalgar Square in central London and moved to the U.S. Embassy. Now, right now, we're still just in Hyde Park, but we'll certainly follow them if they start moving. Allison?
There are plenty of first-time protesters among the thousands of demonstrators in Minneapolis. One of them spoke with NBC News about her first experience marching for a cause.
No peace! No justice, no peace! No justice!
When did you decide that you wanted to go out and protest? What was that moment?
It was the day after, when I seen stuff what was happening. Watching that George Floyd video, it made me feel very uncomfortable. I felt disgusted. So for me to be able to see that happening right down the street from my house, like, I was eager, I was ready to go, because this is what I believe in. I believe that we need to protest and march for people who are being racially profiled, and march for racism all over, and march for equality, you know, so that my kids and other people's kids can live in peace.
Look, you guys, look at this beautiful flowers for him.
So I was born and raised in North Minneapolis. I drive past my own neighborhood, and it kind of makes me tear up every time I see it, because it is just destroyed. We continue to see acts of violence against black people, against minorities, and there's never no justice for nobody.
She's still smoking, y'all. Look.
There's been so many. So for this one to, like, really tip it over the edge and, like, anger people, like, it's really just trying to see it in my city and all over.
What do we want? Justice! When do we want it? Now! When do we want justice? When do we want it? Now! When do we want justice? When do we want it?
Now! Blocked off the city, yo.
Most of it was simple. Like, 38th and Chicago was very peaceful, and so just seeing that, and then just act of violence, like them tear gassing us. We're screaming and yelling, yeah, because we're angry, but it's not like anything violent towards you. And for you to tear gas us and smoke us, it's just very sad. Marching during this pandemic, you know, it's scary, but at the same time, I protect myself and feel like racism or COVID-19 is going to kill us. I definitely want to fight for racism because I want it to change. I want freedom. I want to be able to walk down the street and not fear for my life.
Look, y'all, the National Guard is here.
So I just want people to understand, like, this is years and years of pain. This is generations and generations of pain and suffering from the black community, and we just want justice. We're tired of seeing our people die and nobody and everybody look away. We're all human, you know?
I thank y'all.
I'm just hopeful that a lot of unity comes out of this. Like, we're together, we're not apart, like, we're stronger than ever. That's what I really hope comes out of here, because that's all that we want. We want to be equal. For what I see for the future, and what I hope for the future is unity.
Protesters are out in Atlanta today, and most of them are peaceful. NBC News correspondent Blaine Alexander is in Atlanta. And Blaine, describe for us, what's it like where you are right now?
So, Allison, going into night 6 now of these protests here in Atlanta, you can look behind me. You see the crowd there gathering in the street. You see what we've seen so many times now, this kind of line, police standing right there on bicycle patrol, along with people standing there with signs. But yes, I do have to say that you know, we've seen almost a tale of two different gatherings here in Atlanta. So you go back to Friday night, the very first night, that was when we saw really this explosion of violence. The police chief has said that since then that they were caught off guard. They were surprised, not only because of the sheer number of people, but the elements, as she described it, of people mixed in, people who were coming there and throwing rocks, intent upon setting things on fire and doing damage, doing destruction. They didn't have the manpower. They weren't ready to deal with that. By the time the next night rolled around, things had completely changed from a response standpoint. That's because you saw the National Guard mobilized. You saw the governor had issued a state of emergency, and Atlanta was under a 9 p.m. curfew. Now, as it stands, we've seen kind of this constant de-escalation. In fact, last night, probably a large number of people, but certainly a much more peaceful night. In fact, only a handful, 50 or so people were arrested, Allison.
Blaine Alexander in Atlanta, thank you so much.
Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.